No stories? Okay. We're going to go ahead and finish this lesson. I think we got through these examples. We kind of rushed through them. But we're going to talk about the specific areas of application. And there's a few discussion questions in this section. So really my goal for tonight is to see how much discussion we can bring up that these questions have to offer. Kind of get back into the gist and talk about some examples, talk about some different things on what it looks like to submit and to serve one another. So here's a great question to get us started off. Let's think about our group here at 25th Street. Think about the core group here. What are some specific practical ways that we can serve and submit to one another? I can probably think of a few, and I want to see if everybody can hit those before I speak on them. But I have a few in mind that I feel like we as a group can come together to serve and to help one another. I just also wanted to see any different ideas or anything else that other people were thinking. So go ahead.
It encourages us to get to know our members here and know what their situation is, and if there's anything we can do to help each other.
Okay.
To promote Christ's life in ours.
Okay, I like it. Do you have any specific examples on good ways to do that? What are good ways to get to know one another?
Association together.
Okay. What does that look like? Is everybody, Ethan?
Well, I was thinking, since Chet was talking, there was a group of people that went over, helped him unload some of his things.
Yep.
That he was moving.
That's a good example. Chet?
I'm going to relate one thing to you. I used to live in Fultondale, Alabama.
Okay.
The tornado come through, and some of the members from a church, first thing they done was call us to see if we needed anything.
Yeah.
We had minor damage to our house, and they wanted to come over and survey and something they could do to help us. Well, they was going to do it,
Yeah.
but ours was minor, so.
Gotcha. Another good example.
I mean, the obvious one is to support each other, support the teachers, let them know when they have done a good job. We're so often inclined to complain
Yeah.
instead of praise.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get in the habit of thinking negatively. So we need to change supporting one another. To me, is changing your thoughts, but not just change your thoughts. It's like it needs to take action.
Yeah.
So you just always need to let people know every time. Always a sincere compliment, but encourage people, encourage everybody. When you see somebody that hasn't been here or doesn't come all the time, then let them know.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to see you today.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I'm afraid you're right on the fact that I think most times our first instinct is to complain rather than to look for ways to support and look for positive things. Unfortunately, I feel like as a society even as well, we're more inclined to find ways to think about the negative. And Margaret is 100% right in that first we do need to change our thoughts, change our mind, and let the positive energy flow within us. And then she's also right on the action part. There is action that is necessary for that. Yes, make your mind think positively, but how can you impact on an action standpoint? How can you go out and make a difference and take action to those thoughts? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Remember, we all learned that gratitude is more than attitude.
Yeah, that's true. What else?
Well, we have sign-up sheets on the back wall for teachers and Lord's Supper prep and helping Samantha out. All of those are ways that we need to get involved and help one another so that it's not just the same people doing it over and over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think that's what are those 4 sheets on that window, and then even on that bulletin board over there, there's a lot of opportunities that we can partake in into helping one another because you do have to view it that way. When you do teach class, when you do, if you do something as simple as make the bread and pour the juice every week, that's helping this group out in a way, right? That's not a little task that goes unnoticed, because without that, a task does not get accomplished. So there are ways, and I'm glad you brought that up, ways that we have posted back there that you can look for and that are available to all of us. So I like that a lot as well. Go ahead, Greg.
The question actually is posed, how do we serve and submit to one another? And those are almost synonyms in the way that's being used here. And I think we should acknowledge that service is a giving up of your own time and interest and maybe some of your own resources too, for the good of other people. And that takes a conscious decision, and it takes follow through. You can't just all the time be saying, "Well, I'm there for you," but that you're never there for them.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tangible action of giving part of yourself away to someone else. And honestly, in my case, that's been time that when people will give their time to me to help me forever, that's a valuable submission
Yeah.
to me. I appreciate it.
Bryce?
I think a willingness to break the cycle. And what I mean by that is we have a tendency historically in society, but also in the church, of we work really hard when we're young, and then as we get older, we expect the younger generation to step up and take that load. And we resented the older people who expected us to do that work when we were younger and they were older. And so instead of continuing that cycle, the willingness to step up even as we age and do things that might, cost us and feel like a sacrifice for the sake of our brothers and sisters who need a break occasionally from things that they're willing to do and glad to do, but if they have to do it too much, they feel just as overwhelmed as we did when we were younger.
Yeah.
And it's very encouraging when older people continue to do some of those things. Maybe they can't do them as often as they did them before.
Yeah.
And eventually we all get to a point where there are things that we just can't do.
Right.
But as much as we can, let's think about ways that we can serve to relieve our brothers and sisters in ways that will be helpful to them and show that their needs and their feelings and those kinds of things are important to us.
Yeah.
It can become easy as we get older to think, now it's my turn to receive. We did all these things when we were young.
Yeah.
It's okay to be on the receiving end of things, but it's still our time to give. Christianity is all about service, and that doesn't stop no matter how old we are. It
Yeah.
may look differently, but it still continues. And I appreciate the older generation that we have as examples here of people who continue to do and grow and work and so we need to seek to be like that. It's part of submitting to each other.
Yeah, I was about to say that I think that's a good way to describe our duty into submitting to one another, because I do believe if you have that opportunity to kind of relieve someone of something they've been taking over a lot recently, that is a form of submission to them. Like, let me take it over for you. Let me serve you in this way. Let me submit to you in this way so you can have a break from it. And I was also about to add, you mentioned the point of, obviously, as you get older, there are things you can't do anymore.
Sure.
But we do have to realize that this is a work that you can never fully retire from. We have to look at it that way, I think. And maybe I'm not the best person to speak on it, as I'm not very old and don't understand a lot of the challenges of being older. But in my mind, if you're striving to always do the best that you can, you're striving to always produce and serve as much as you are able to, that's something you should never look to not take a break from or take a tiny step back from, but never look to retire from, if that makes sense, right? Never look to fully stop going forward. Ethan?
One practical thing that's helpful for me is if I suspect that somebody needs help, whether it's I know they're in a situation or maybe I just have a hunch, asking if there's anything that I can do, because that's a big step, and it's easy to say you'll be in my prayers, or think about, I really need to help that person, and then never actually take any
Yeah.
forward steps. So asking, and I found if you just reach out to someone and ask generally, is there anything I can do? You'll a lot of times hear, no, we're fine.
Yeah.
So looking for specific things,
Yeah.
whether it's, do you need any meals? Do you need me to run some medicine to you?
Yeah.
Do you want us to watch the kids for a little bit? Whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. Look back at the times that you maybe have been asked a question similar, like, is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can help you with? And there's probably some times where you've felt it to be very genuine, and you know that they are actually there seeking to help you. And then there are other times you may have felt that it's more of a passing comment, more of the kind of what Greg had mentioned earlier, what Ethan just mentioned, that kind of quick, brief, just to try to keep the conversation going. And that goes back to the importance of creating relationships with each other. Because if we have strong bonds with one another and strong connections with one another, if I'm going through something and you know that I'm going through something, and then you ask me how you can help, I should be able to know that that's a genuine question. And that's something that you're genuinely wanting to help me with and asking. And if you don't have that strong bond, it's easy to not be as invested in someone to be genuine about it, or on the other side, really think of it as someone who, I don't really know that person very well. It's easy for you to think, I think they're just saying that just to be nice, or a passing comment. Not that you can't not know someone very well and then ask how you can serve them, because that's definitely something you can do. But in the instance, kind of what has been brought up, what we're talking about, going back to the portion of when we're talking about relationships with one another, another important key on why we should really consider that kind of thing. Samantha.
Like if, something I was thinking about, if you know that someone's going through something, checking in on them and seeing how they're doing, and go back to what you were talking about a couple weeks ago of encouraging one another. I think
Yeah.
that's a big thing too, is just do what you can to encourage.
Yeah. I think that goes a long way, and I think what you're getting at is maybe, not only asking one time, but continuing to check up with them and see, even if it's, throughout the week, on a Tuesday, whatever, that you need to give them a call, send them a text, or, say, hey, can we go get lunch or whatever? Let me take you out to lunch, whatever it is, right, Emily?
Along with Ethan's point, I think we're talking a lot of how to serve each other. I think one fantastic way to submit to one another is by allowing people to serve you.
Yeah.
So when someone does reach out and say, how can I help you? Be honest and let them help, because that's all they want to do. They're not doing it out of, oh, well, I have to ask, so I might as well. How can I help? But actually submitting yourself to being humble enough to receive help.
As someone who has struggled with that very topic for a lot of my life, I've never liked people helping me. I don't know why. Why wouldn't you want people to help you and be kind to you and serve you in that way? But for some reason, and I think I found it to be a lot more common than I thought it was. I think there's a lot of people who try to figure out things more on their own and think they can take care of everything and not care for people to help them. And what I found out is when I ended up letting people into my life and helping me, it was 10 times better than me trying to figure out all my problems by myself. And what Emily's getting at is we have to have that mindset of, even if the urge is to get away from that and tell people and try to push them off, let them in. Let them help you. Because how can we allow each other to submit and to serve one another if we're pushing them away? We have to allow each other to do that duty, if that makes sense. I like that comment a lot. Any other thoughts, or maybe new ways we can think of looking to help serve one another in the future that maybe it's not as common that we think about?
I miss my dad. And he's been gone 25 years. So I need people to ask advice of.
Yeah.
And so I look for older people for that. Because I'm tired of making
Thanks for sharing that. I think that is a good look into, because it seems sometimes small, just little conversations, little ways to encourage one another. But it does go a long way to have someone you know you can rely on and know who's going to help you through different situations. I think this is kind of summing up a lot of what we've talked about with all these lessons. But I love the passion that Greg has to say, I have sought for older people. And the way that I look back in my life and the advice I've gotten from not only my parents and grandparents, but mentors, people in my church, people even who I went to school with, right? I had a lot of teachers in high school I was close to, and I sought a lot of advice from. So it goes a long way, and that is a phenomenal way to serve one another and to help one another out through life. Samantha?
Kind of bouncing a little bit off of what Greg said, I was just thinking, like, you know, kind of speaking from personal experience on this one, there are people in the church who are the only Christian in their family, and that can be difficult at times because it's harder to relate to your family when you're the only one who follows the Lord. So
Yeah.
kind of something along those lines, like, I don't really know, but just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we can serve one another just by being a family, being a support system for one another. Once again, kind of backing off what different things have been said, a support system goes a long way. And it is an act of service to be able to support one another throughout these things. And that's exactly what we're talking about, Bryce.
A huge way to submit to our brothers and sisters and to serve is to be real.
Okay.
Authentic.
Yeah.
Most of us have had struggles in our life and in our faith and in our walk with God, and certainly before our walk with God began, but even after our walk with God started, we've struggled.
Yeah.
Be real about that, because there are people who are struggling who need to know they're not alone. They're not. There's not something wrong with them. They're not weird. They're not unique in that sense.
Yeah.
They're like everybody else. We're all works in progress. And so let's be real with each other. Let's talk about not only the ways that we've succeeded and the things that have worked for us, but the things that haven't worked for us and the areas where we've struggled, and let people know that, you know, God has made a huge difference in my life, but I'm not perfect. I still struggle with things. I mean, there are things that I struggle with now that I look at myself and I think, that's ridiculous. You should have this licked by now, and I just don't.
Yeah.
And part of it's because I haven't surrendered to the Lord the way I need to, and part of it's because I haven't utilized some of the tools that He's given me, my brethren, the way that I should. And so let's be real with each other as people who don't have it all figured out, but are longing to be with God and to help one another get there. That's quite the submission.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that, some of the biggest failures and struggles in our life can lead to some of the best things.
Absolutely.
And can lead to the people who we are today. So there is something in being said, and that's why we share those experiences. That's why we help people who are just like us. Did you know it's very common to struggle in life? Did you know actually everybody throughout their life will struggle at least one time, if not 500 times, right? That's a very normal, Bryce talked about the idea of people not being unique for the way they struggle. It's not a unique situation. Now, there are unique situations to different struggles, but everybody goes through struggles and failures. We are all going to fail. That's why Jesus died for us, because we did fail, right? But at the end of the day, that's who we were made to be. But God gave us the family, God gave us the chance, and God gave us this life. So we can do with it what He commands us to do. What kind of service, and also what kind of service are we doing to others if we're fake? And if it's all fake, and it's all built on stuff that's not true, and all built on someone who we're not even, what kind of service are we doing to people? And is that submitting to people? Absolutely not. So Bryce has a very, very valid point in the fact that we need to be real. And that's what we're called to do with each other. I look at a lot of people in this room, and what makes this group so special is the fact that we all have committed to one another, in a sense. Have you noticed that? Even if you haven't thought about it. Look at all the faces in this room and think about the relationship you had with, think about the introductions you had with some of these people. It was real from the very beginning. That's what makes it so special, and that's what makes it so real. So thanks for sharing that, Brace. It's a very good thought. Go ahead, Samantha.
To make it go kind of off what you said about this group here. I have to admit it, I've never seen such an emotional group, but I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's, to me, it's okay. It tells everybody else that it's okay to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah, don't take this in the wrong way, but I would, the only group I want to be a part of is a group that is allowing themselves to be emotional, to be vulnerable with one another, to allow people into each other's lives, because that's real. That's what real is. That's what life is. So that's, I mean, I wouldn't want it any other way. It really does allow us to be stronger and closer to one another. So I truly believe that. I think that's a great passageway into having such great relationships with one another. So. Anything else on that standpoint? I think we hit a lot of great things. We hit most of what I was thinking, so I appreciate that. I'm glad we had a good discussion on that. So is there any more thoughts? Make sure nothing's left unsaid. Okay, let's talk about leadership. Let's talk about elders for a little bit. Last night we had our men's leadership study, and we had a great conversation on the topic of specific roles and leadership roles within a congregation such as this one. So that was a good discussion to have. So we'll touch on that a little bit. Let's talk about this question 8 here. It's based off of Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17, which says, "Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you." So this question asks, what is the responsibility of members to elders? Go ahead, Samantha.
To not argue with them about every single decision they make that you don't like.
Okay.
Because doing that's just making their job that much harder. I mean, I'm pretty sure elders make decisions knowing perfectly well that not everybody's going to agree with them. You don't have to make that job that much harder by being argumentative about it or nasty.
Yeah. And even if you don't like something that a leadership group has done, and we don't, there's different ways to go about it. There's mature ways and immature ways. But yeah, that's a good. Ethan, go ahead.
Directly to what Samantha said, version that I'm looking at right now says, "Obey your leaders and defer to them."
Yeah. You want to define defer?
I was thinking about that. So more so like an example, I guess, of maybe there's a decision that I don't totally agree with, or I don't know necessarily the right thing to do, but I'm gonna trust and let them make those decisions, and I defer. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's hard to put in a word, but yeah, I think Samantha.
Kind of like what you're saying earlier about, it's okay to disagree, but how you go about disagreeing is important, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, I could go and talk about it with them and say why I disagree with it, but going around and telling everybody else why you disagreed with it and basically trash talking the leadership is totally unacceptable.
Alrighty. So let's move on and talk about the different ways, whether examples that you've seen, whether examples you've seen here, or different suggestions, different ways, anything you really want. I'm going to open it up to the group here on ways that we as a people have submitted to the leadership of the elders, or ways you would like to see more of that, if that makes sense. I think it makes sense. And this can be a little bit of a difficult topic at times, so it might not be an easy conversation, but once again, with having a group like this, it's okay to talk, and I can say a lot of things, and I don't ever feel scared to, and don't ever feel judged, even though some people might not agree with what I say. So just to put that out there. Bryce, go ahead.
I mean, in the past, what this looked like practically in my life would be that, I mean, there were inevitably decisions that were made by leadership that I didn't agree with and didn't necessarily think they were the best course of action.
Yeah.
But I never doubted the men that have served here, and what their aim was, and that it was the well-being of this group as a whole. And so I reminded myself of that fact, even if I didn't necessarily see how this was the best choice. And the other thing that I did practically was that I would get behind those decisions in the sense that I didn't badmouth what they did, what they said,
Yeah.
what they were planning, and I tried to be involved in it in whatever ways that I could, and show my support in that kind of way, and pray for it, that it would be successful the way that they wanted it to be. And so those are practical ways that we can get behind a decision that we don't necessarily agree with. We're talking about matters of judgment, obviously. If it's something that's unscriptural, then we know where we have to stay.
Yeah.
In matters of judgment, then that idea that Ethan talked about in the translation, is that in the NET? No?
NEB.
NEB. So, but the idea of deferring
Yeah.
to them is a recognition of their role, and in the case of the men whom I was submitting to, recognizing their character and what they're standing for. I mean, they're not perfect,
Yeah.
but they're not selfish, and they weren't just trying to be bullheaded. They were trying to do what was best for the group, and I never doubted that.
Yeah. I like that example a lot. The way that you described how maybe you didn't care for or quite agree 100% with decisions that were made, but still you never doubted them. And the way you talked about that and still trusted them. There's a level of trust that does need to be there. And you need, if you are part of a group and there's a leadership, group, for instance, elders, there is a sense that we need to respect them, even if they make decisions that you just necessarily don't agree with. Bryce mentioned the fact that scriptural and non-scriptural, right? There's a difference between those kinds of matters, and we have to support them no matter what, right? Unless it's that kind of case. Ethan?
So I was thinking about what Grace said as a younger person, and so if the team of leaders is trying to guide us in a certain direction, or they make a decision, then one way that I could practically submit to that or support that is go and ask, what can I do to help move this along?
Yeah.
Is there some task that needs to be done? Is there some kind of groundwork that needs to be laid? How can I contribute to this and support it?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because elders are going to make decisions, but at the end of the day, it doesn't lie all on them to make everything happen. To where the members of the group can just sit around and let them do whatever they want and let them do all the work. We're all called to work. We're all called to serve in this way. So I think Ethan brings up a really good point, and looking and seeking out those ways for yourself. Giving it a point for yourself to go up and talk about those and say, hey, how can I help you in this direction, right? Especially if a group is moving away from some certain things or trying to move in a different direction. It takes everybody, and it takes the work of everybody together. So I like that a lot. So let's talk about this relationship for a minute. Turn over to 1 Peter. Can someone read 1 Peter 5 and chapter 5, verse 5? Please. Just whoever's there, go ahead. If anybody's there, you guys can go ahead and read it. Alicia, you there?
I just got to.
Okay, there you go.
Likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble.
Okay, so take this verse. Let's wrap it up. What is the responsibility of the younger to the older?
I need to submit to them in humility. And part of that is realizing I don't know everything. And I don't have nearly the experience that they do.
And why is that humility important?
Because God resists proud people.
And how hard is it to be humble?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes with older and younger people. As a younger person, there's been many times in my life where I'm like, for example, Dad, I know better than you. You may have said this, I'm going to do this. I think I know better than you in this situation. Where do you think that ended up? Just about where you think it ended up, right? We've talked a lot about this topic already, but the value that comes with life experience and the value that comes with overcoming challenges over time is a very, very big thing. And to be able to, as younger people, humble ourselves to realize and understand that value and respect the people for that value. Ethan, do you have something else?
Yeah, I was just going to add that if you think about this, there's probably a really good reason that Peter decides to single out a command like this, specifically to young people needing to be humble enough to submit to the older. I would guess it's because how frequent that's a problem. Because, you just ask the question of, okay, why would he write this? And it's because it's a really big problem.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bryce.
I'm going to throw one out there that's not even on this question sheet, and I'm
Okay.
a little bothered that it's not. I think it's a systemic problem, and that is the need for elders to submit to the flock.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Well, I mean, it's just a reality.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem that is historically a problem in the church is that we always emphasize that the flock is to submit, that the sheep are to submit to the shepherds.
Yeah.
But the reality is the shepherds need to never lose sight of the fact that it is their responsibility to put the needs of the flock ahead of their own. And when we do that, we've ceased being the kind of shepherds God wants us to be.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if Jesus is our model, he is the one who modeled before us better than anyone.
Yep.
That the responsibility to submit and serve and all of those things. And so we can never lose sight of that as shepherds and think, yeah, the church needs to submit to us and emphasize that point and call attention to, Hebrews 13:17 and other passages that talk about that and fail to recognize our own responsibility.
Yeah. While I was going through this, I did wonder to myself, I wonder what that relationship looks like for elder to submit to flock, because in my mind, I had that same thought process. Because in my mind, I'm like, isn't the whole reason what elders do what they do is for the good of the flock and to help better them and grow them? And it's really, they are there to serve the flock. And the way it feels right in my mind is there is a type of submission that needs to go into that. This is your group of people that you are watching over. Maybe there may be things you have to do that maybe you don't necessarily think is right, or you don't think is necessary, but understand that the flock it's something that they need. So as little experience I have with that, that's what I'll say about it. Is I do feel like that is true, that there does need to be that kind of relationship. Ethan?
Yeah, I think that's supported by the previous paragraph there. I mean, because if you look at it, shepherd the flock
Yeah.
of how you were shepherding those people.
Yeah, I think that passage does back that up pretty well and show that kind of relationship that is kind of called for elders to have. Yeah, verse 3, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. Elders do have to think about what kind of example are they going to set. And that goes at another part of it, right? Showing that you're willing to be humble yourself and you're willing to make sacrifices and help people out in that way. So that is a good side thought for that as well. Not necessarily a side thought, it's pretty important. But yeah, I think so. Let's see here.
Kind of a funny way that someone one time described, it was in the role of wives submitting to their husbands, but husbands submitting to their needs of their wife. And he was like, if you ever tell your husband, I don't care, choose what to make for dinner, or choose where we're going for dinner. It's then their role to say, oh, well, I know you hate Mexican, so I'm not going to choose Mexican because I want to submit to what your needs are. And I don't know, that's always stuck with me as like a easy way to understand, well, you have the ultimate choice. Like, you're not going to choose something that's bad or something that the flock doesn't want or doesn't need. So that's just always the funny way I remember it.
Did we hear that together? I feel like I've heard that before.
No, it's a deaf camp.
Yeah, definitely not there. That's a girl thing. Okay. But yeah, I think that's a funny but true way to kind of describe that. I have to put myself in that shoes. She doesn't like Mexican, so if we're ever going out, just the two of us, we don't get Mexican. My father-in-law really likes Mexican, so if we ever go out, 80% of the time it might be Mexican. So I'm part of a networking group that meets on Wednesdays over the Elmo Paul as well. So I get free Mexican once a week. So I got my fill. Don't worry if you were worried about me. But yeah, good example. Okay, let's wrap this up. Going off of 1 Peter 5, verse 5, does anybody have a good phrasing of why it is important to submit and serve one another?
Christ is our prime example. He's the one that served for us.
Yes.
To have salvation.
Yeah.
By giving his life for that.
Yes. Jesus is in fact the one true and prime example of what it looks like to completely serve and submit to a group of people. I like that answer. Any other thoughts? Anything to add to that?
Another thing about submitting one another, in Ephesians 4, it talks about, building up of the body. And so when you submit to one another, it's encouraging, and you notice that. You notice when, someone submits to what you want and puts themselves at a lower position, and you appreciate that. It builds appreciation and goodwill, and it can build up the whole church.
Yeah. The way I see it, at least, submission shows a form of commitment. And it does feel nice to know that you have a commitment with people and that you are committed. Because when you are committed to people, you have pledged to serve one another. You have pledged to be there for one another, to have this relationship to grow with one another. I think about a commitment in a marital status, right? That commitment to be together through better, through worse, through everything you can ever imagine. And I think we can apply that to we can apply that to submitting to one another, because in a sense, when we do submit to each other, it is a commitment to say, hey, I'm going to submit to you, to serve you, to help you out, to be there for you, to have this relationship with you. That's the way I see it, and I think there's a lot of value and importance to that. Jim?
I was thinking, God is a God of order. He's given an order for the home, for the government, and the church. And if we all get in our place and stay there, everything works.
Yeah.
Get out of place, that's what we'll get in trouble. Christ is the head of man. Man's the head of woman. God's over Christ. There's the order. You get in your place and stay there, we'll have peace in the valley.
Yeah. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think each of those, it shows the order with the commitment that each one has to each other. And it shows that, and the reason why it works so well is through that commitment, through that the way that one has served other, right? The way that God has served us, that Jesus then showed us, right? I think that goes into it as well. Bryce?
I gotta rethink what I was gonna say.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Is it gone?
Just completely lost it.
It'll
It'll come
work.
back by the time the bell rings.
Yeah, in about 30 seconds or now. Does anyone, before you close your books, does anybody want to read that little paragraph there, that little, whatever you want to call it? Just for a little send-off encouragement.
Both of them or just that?
Yeah, both of them is fine.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Greece said, be wise, know yourself. Rome said, be strong, discipline yourself. Epicureanism says, be sensuous, enjoy yourself. Education says, be resourceful, expand yourself. Psychology says, be confident, assert yourself. Materialism says, be satisfied, please yourself. Pride says, be superior, promote yourself. Humanism says, be capable, believe in yourself. Yourself, yourself, yourself. We're up to here with self. Do something either for yourself or with yourself or to yourself. How very different from Jesus' model and message. No philosophy to turn our eyes inward. He offers rather a fresh and much needed invitation to our me-first generation. There is a better way. Jesus says, be a servant, give to others.
Remember that. It's not about us individually. It's about us collectively. And how we're going to look for ways to serve one another and go away from being selfish and look for ways to serve, just as Jesus did.